On our newscast tonight, a high-ranking U.S. military official says North Korea has the ability to strike America with a nuclear-armed missile. He called the assessment a prudent decision. The nuclear deal reached between Iran and the world powers is expected to open up vast business opportunities for Korean companies, especially construction firms. And as the number of elderly parents being cared for by their children drops and the number of aging Koreans rises, more people are turning to the government for answers. These stories and more coming up. Welcome to Primetime News on this Wednesday, April 8th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
We begin with some new information on North Korea's weapons capability.
A senior U.S. military leader says Pyongyang can fire a road-mobile ICBM capable of carrying nuclear weapons to the U.S. mainland.
And that's another topic for the U.S. defense chief to discuss with Japan and South Korea when he visits this week. Na Young-kyung starts us off.
The doubts about a North Korean missile are turning into a real threat. Many watchers had believed that North Korea's KN-08 intercontinental ballistic missile, paraded in 2012, was a mock-up. But a senior U.S. military official says Pyongyang has likely made a breakthrough.
Our assessment is that they have the ability to put it on a nuclear weapon on a KN-08 and shoot it at the homeland.
While refusing to explain the evidence, Admiral Courtney said the missile is operational today, but added that the regime has not yet tested the weapon. The KN-08 could have a range of up to 9,000 kilometers, according to North Korea monitoring website 38 North, which means it could reach the U.S. mainland. The U.S. is known to have about 30 ground-based interceptors on its west coast, but the fact that the KN-08 is a road-mobile weapon is going to make it difficult for Washington to carry out a preemptive strike on the missile. The commander's comments and the report come amid U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter's visit to Japan and Korea this week. The speculation is that these factors will make Washington's alleged push for deployment of its so-called THAAD missile defense system to South Korea more legitimate. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
And amid increasing concern over Pyongyang's ballistic missile capabilities, a senior U.S. military official says that an American missile defense system known as THAAD could be a crucial component in neutralizing the threat. Son Jung-in reports.
Frank Rose, U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Arms Control, Verification and Compliance, has reiterated that no decision or official negotiations have been held with South Korea regarding the possible deployment of a THAAD battery to its soil. But Rose added that if they were to move in that direction, THAAD would be a critical capability in dealing with the threats posed by North Korea. Rose also stressed that the battery does not have any capability against China's strategic deterrent, rejecting the notion that such a deployment would pose a threat to China and Russia's security interests. Elaine Bunn, U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear and Missile Defense Policy, shared a similar stance on the issue, saying it's premature for China to worry since Seoul and Washington are not currently holding any formal discussions on the matter. However, she added that even when consultations do take place, it will be for the U.S. and South Korea to decide what course to take. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korea says Iran's nuclear situation is completely different from Pyongyang's. An official from North Korea's mission to the United Nations told Voice of America that last week's agreement on curbing Tehran's nuclear program is good for Iran, but that the North is indifferent. The official said Pyongyang cannot give up its nuclear arms when American aircraft carriers with tactical nuclear weapons are hovering around the Korean peninsula. The official was referring to a recent round of military exercises between Seoul and Washington, which the two countries say they were purely defensive in nature.
A private research institute in Korea says it's found documentary evidence of the Japanese military's forcible recruitment of women for sexual slavery before and during World War II. Tokyo has maintained that there is no evidence to back up this accusation, but our Ojinju reports this document suggests otherwise.
The Japanese government says there is no evidence that Japan had forcibly recruited women for wartime sex slaves. But now, a Japanese document recently found by the Busan-based Korea-Japan Culture Research Institute is countering this claim. The document is a certificate issued in 1940 by Yoshihide Hayashi, who was at that time commander of the Taiwan Army Research Section. The certificate was intended for a director in charge of what they called comfort women stations. It says the director will be taking comfort women by force to Japan's army units in China and adds that these women are essential to the troops, so make sure that there is no difficulty for the director in making the crossing. Kim Moon-gil, head of the research institute that found the document, points out its significance.
It is a document showing that the Japanese army ordered the recruitment of the sex slaves. This is the first document that actually used the word that means forcibly took away.
On the document, the name and address of the director in charge of the brothels were erased. According to Kim, the absence hints that Tokyo is trying to deny its wartime atrocities when there's clear evidence.
All the names of the comfort women are also erased in the documents with black markers. It just shows that the Japanese government is trying to hide its past wrongdoings.
The institute found the document in a compilation of Japanese records published in 1997 by the Asian Women's Fund. The fund was set up by the Japanese government in the early 1990s to compensate victims of the country's military sexual enslavement before and during World War II. Ojinju, Arirang News.
No matter how hard Japan tries to destroy its past wartime atrocities, there's no denying that war causes pain to the most vulnerable. Civilian victims of the Vietnam War showed support for Korean survivors of Japan's military sexual slavery on Wednesday, taking part in the weekly protest held outside the Japanese embassy in Seoul. They encouraged the Korean protesters to continue their demonstrations. Only 53 out of 238 sexual slaves remain alive. And while Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se blasted Japan's recent territorial claims over Dokdo Island on Wednesday, Tokyo continues efforts to gain international support for their misguided claims. Our Kim Yeon-bin has details.
Japan has renewed its false claim to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island by increasing the number of textbooks making the assertion. In 2011, only 4 out of 18 textbooks carried the claim, but that number jumped to 13 this year. Japan has long laid claim to Dokdo. Tokyo says it incorporated Dokdo into Japanese territory under international law in 1905, and that Seoul is occupying the territory illegally. Last year, at a Take Back Dokdo ceremony in Tokyo, a cabinet member had promised to strengthen Japan's territorial claims in school textbooks.
We will pursue various efforts to educate people from home and abroad so they understand our stance.
So why is Japan stepping up its claim now?
Japan wants to let other countries know there is a sovereignty conflict, to increase awareness as the case comes to the International Court of Justice.
Experts say that another factor is that this year is the 70th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II, meaning there's more attention on Japan. Kim Yeon-bin, Arirang News.
Now, if the Iran nuclear deal goes through, economic sanctions imposed on the country could be eased or even lifted. Now, the move would create massive business opportunities for Korean companies. Many recall a booming past in the oil-rich country. Shin Se-min tells us more.
Korean firms doing business in Iran may be back on track soon. The companies, mostly construction firms, are gearing up for a wide range of business opportunities there as Iran is in the midst of boosting its infrastructure. Iran was the 4th largest construction market for Korean builders before international sanctions were imposed in 2006, and the orders from Tehran stopped in 2009.
Korean construction firms have established a good reputation, as many of them even stuck around during the Iraq War. With the sanctions to be lifted, the Iranian market will open up, giving more orders to companies like TIME International, GS-ENC, and Hyundai ENC, Korea's leading builders.
The easing of sanctions on Iran is expected to open up other doors for Korea as well. Korean exporters of auto parts and steel are also hoping to reap the benefits of the nuke deal. In addition, this opens the way of new influx of goods and services from Iran to Korea.
Without the sanctions on Iran, Korean companies will at least be able to recapture their market share, which was lost due to the sanctions. And Iran will also be buying Korean-made goods like home appliances and IT products.
And there's another big benefit for Koreans at home and abroad. Under the deal, Iran will be allowed to increase its oil exports by up to 1 million barrels per day. And experts say that could bring down the global oil prices by as early as next year, resulting in cheaper oil for both Korean companies in Iran and Korean drivers here at home. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The gap between the haves and the have-nots is widening in Korea as it's in most countries around the world. Korea's richest 10% are spending more on designer brands and luxury goods, while most people are cutting back on the basics. Kwon So-ah reports.
The polarization of spending habits in Korea is getting worse, as the nation's low and mid-income earners struggle to get by, while the rich continue to enjoy the good times despite the sluggish economy. Data released by the retail industry on Wednesday shows first-quarter sales at large retailers, popular among consumers who tend to watch their pennies, mostly declined compared to 1 year ago. Lotte Mart, the second biggest retailer in the country, posted a 3% drop in sales, and Home Plus an almost 1% dip, while E-Mart, the nation's #1 retailer, saw sales edge up a mere 0.8%. Breaking it down, E-Mart's fashion and grain sales in March both plunged by over 10% on year. Fisheries and processed food fell by 9% and 3% respectively. The big supermarkets have tried to boost sales by reducing the price of everyday products such as milk, but the figures speak for themselves, as sales managers say the strategies weren't that effective. On the other hand, sales of more expensive products like imported spices and vegetables weren't that affected. That trend is even clearer when we look at sales at two of Korea's high-end department stores, Lotte and Hyundai. They recorded gains of between 8% and 15% in their luxury designer label sales. This reflects a recent study which shows Korea's richest 10% own nearly half of the nation's wealth.
Department stores and distributors these days are focusing more of their efforts on marketing strategies targeting VVIPs, as their consumption takes up a considerable amount of sales.
Some examples of this include special campaigns for products like expensive desserts and premium coffee, and that's raising concerns that spending trends will become even more polarized. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, with the younger generation feeling less of a responsibility towards elderly parents, expectations are growing for the government to take on a bigger role in the well-being of aging Koreans. As our Connie Kim reports, calls are mounting for a greater balance of support between family, society, and the government.
Children taking care of their aging parents has been the norm in Korea's deep-rooted Confucian culture for centuries. But is it still the case these days?
I don't think it's possible for families to solely look after aging parents. Life expectancy has gone longer while people are retiring earlier.
After raising my kids, I don't want to become a burden to them after I stop working. I think the government needs to play an active role in supporting seniors. This seems to be the growing public sentiment. A report by the Korea Development Institute shows that over the past decade, children who think they should support their aging parents plunged from about 70% to slightly over 30%.
The drop is mainly due to the shrinking size of families and parents putting a priority on investing in their children's education. These factors are quickly diminishing the traditional norm of supporting elderly parents.
Kim, the author of the report, says a changing culture has resulted in more senior citizens unable to financially support themselves.
Korea's elderly poverty and suicide rates rank the highest among OECD nations. In light of those grim figures, this report calls on families, society, and the government to work together to find ways to economically and emotionally support aging generations.
It also calls for the government to create a system that will revitalize the social well-being of seniors.
Some community welfare centers have programs that help engage the elderly and younger generations. But there needs to be more social workers and programs that aim to nurture active participation from the elderly population.
While systematic support is key, experts also say it's necessary for individuals to do more to prepare for their senior years.
Many are aware of the seriousness of Korea's aging society and elderly poverty problem, but not much is actively done. People should have a portfolio of income sources aside from their monthly pension payments.
Korea's welfare ministry says 3 out of 10 people over the age of 65 continue to work post-retirement, mainly to support daily living costs. This as 11% of senior citizens say they've thought of committing suicide, mainly due to economic hardships. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Shifting our focus to the National Assembly, before lawmakers, the floor leader of the ruling Saenuri Party, Yoo Seung-min, advocated for political cooperation in the handling of pressing issues, the recovery of the sunken Sewol ferry, and the government's push for public pension reforms. Our Choi Yoo-sun reports.
In his first address to the National Assembly since being elected the ruling party's floor leader, Yoo Seung-min said the government should keep its promise to find every missing body from the Sewol ferry, which sank off Korea's southwestern coast almost a year ago.
I'm calling for the swift conclusion of a technical review on the salvage and recovery of the Sewol ferry.
9 of the more than 300 passengers who died in the accident remain unaccounted for. The families of the victims have demanded the vessel be recovered immediately. President Park Geun-hye said earlier this week the government will pursue the issue after the civilian-led technical review. The ruling party floor leader also urged the opposition party to participate in reforming Korea's costly public employee pension system. The two parties had previously agreed to reach a compromise on the matter by the end of this month's parliamentary session.
If the opposition party wants to call itself an economic party, it must push for the passage of public employee pension reforms during the April session.
The outspoken lawmaker also criticized the Park administration's welfare without taxes policy, saying it's time for the rival political parties to set their differences aside and talk about achieving a balance between welfare and taxes. As for the question of stationing the controversial THAAD U.S. missile defense system in South Korea, Yoo stressed that Seoul needs to display a strong deterrent against North Korea's security threats to bring about peace in the region. In a rare move, the main opposition party welcomed Yoo's message, taking special note of his criticisms of the government's economic policies. Opposition party leader Moon Jae-in will address the assembly on Thursday. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Let's jump over to the art realm now. 81 years ago, Korean poet Lee Sang wrote a poem titled 오감도. It expressed his frustrations about life during the country's colonial period. Now, that poem has inspired an exhibition to mark the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence from Japan. 201 오감도 displays artworks depicting the atmosphere of a newly liberated Korea. Anxiety and confusion stand alongside expressions of true independence. Visitors will be able to see more than 800 works, including paintings, installations, and multimedia pieces done by artists and college students.
It's time to take a look at the leading headlines from around the world with Paul Lee.
Our focus today, a shocking police shooting grips the U.S., the crisis in Yemen grows, and on a more lighter note, Star Wars finally going online. But let's start with our first story.
Paul, so following the events in Ferguson and New York City last year, tensions have flared over police violence in the United States, even sparking nationwide protests. Give us the details on the latest case.
Well, it centers around a white police officer in South Carolina who's accused of murdering an unarmed black man in broad daylight. After reviewing footage of the incident, state investigators announced Tuesday that they would indict 33-year-old Michael Slager for the death of Walter Scott. The FBI and U.S. Justice Department have launched their own joint investigation into the incident.
It's been a tragic day for many. A tragic day for many. I'm sure the family is going through remorse over the loss of a loved one, and when you hear news, it's still tragic. When you first get news, just that we've been gotten today.
Cell phone video apparently recorded by a bystander shows Slager shooting as the 50-year-old African-American ran away after being pulled over for a traffic violation. The footage allegedly contradicts the officer's testimony that the victim had his taser and posed a threat to his life. And turning to the ongoing crisis in Yemen, international aid groups are scrambling to provide relief to civilians there as Houthi rebels continue to battle government forces. The UN Children's Fund said at least 74 children have been killed since Saudi-led airstrikes began late last month. The global body also warned that a breakdown in water supply and poor living conditions could raise the death toll even higher.
The last 24 hours, about 12 metric tons of medical supplies have arrived in Aden from Al Hudaydah and distributed to health centers and hospitals. Medical assistance has also been delivered in Sada. Monthly food supplies have been distributed to more than 300 displaced families in Hajj.
Meanwhile, the International Committee of the Red Cross plans to fly in 48 tons of medical supplies through Friday. Medical charity Doctors Without Borders has vowed to send a team of surgeons to the embattled city of Aden, where fighting has intensified this past week. And finally, ending on a lighter note, American pop star Taylor Swift and British singer Sam Smith have been nominated for this year's Top Billboard Music Awards. The two earned 4 nominations each after the top 5 categories were announced on Tuesday. The coveted award show is slated for May 17th in Las Vegas. And in New York, the original manuscript for the iconic song American Pie has been sold at auction for $1.2 million. Composed by music legend Don McLean, the single was first released in 1971 and has since been dubbed one of the greatest songs of the 20th century. And after years of waiting, one of the biggest sci-fi epics is finally hitting online streaming services. Starting this Friday, fans of Star Wars will be able to buy the 6 films through digital downloads for the very first time. The next chapter in the Star Wars saga is set to hit theaters later this year. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Hwang Ji-hye with your weather update. Spring flowers are in full bloom, but the weather has not been so cooperative. But the temperature is set to finally break into mid-teens in the upper parts of the country, including here in the capital. Air quality continues to be good and mostly sunny skies are on tap for tomorrow, but inland regions could wake up to foggy conditions tomorrow morning, so drive with extra caution. And with that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. The capital will kick off at a low of 4 and later on will jump up to 16, and Gwangju and Busan will hit a high of 18 and 13 respectively. And as for the other regions, it looks like Daejeon and Jeju Island will top out at 16 and 15, and Dokdo only rises to 8. Now more warm days are ahead of us, but there's another round of light precipitation in the forecast for early next week. Well, that's the weather for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you so much for staying with us. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Do join us same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.